Okay, so now we are going to discuss about what is a web application. Now, so far, what we've learned so far with Java or with Spring Boot, you have an application which is a standalone application. Basically, you start that application and then it does all some series of commands and then it stops. When we are talking about a web application, you don't want it to stop. You want to be continuously on and continuously available. Think of a website. If your server crashes, it's very bad because you don't have a website or a mobile application or so on. So how would you normally build a web application without Spring? So basically you have like a Java application, you will need to build your jar, but you need to do some configuration. It's a var file from web application, but let's not get into specifics, just imagine these steps. And then you will need to take your jar file and deploy it on a server. Server, which is another application, doesn't necessarily need to be built in Java, is another application which basically will take your jar file and will run in a continuously loop and expose your particular code, your particular jar file on a specific address, on a specific port. Now the most common one, if you deploy it locally, it's 127.0.0.1, which basically you can replace with localhost, and the most common port is 8080, but you can configure this. And this is basically how you do. Now, maybe it's simple in this slide, but it's actually very complex because you need to do a lot of configuration. You need to have like an XML file. You need to configure your endpoints and so on. And you will see how Spring basically simplifies everything for us. And this, I put here Tomcat because it's the most common server on which you will usually download. But there are other servers like Netty, Glassfish, and so on. Doesn't matter. The basically is you need to do a lot of manual steps, a lot of steps for you to build a web application. Now Spring Boot, not Spring, Spring Boot, the web module comes with an embedded Tomcat in it. So when you have a Spring Boot web module, it will do all these steps for you. So it will add an embedded Tomcat, it will download a Tomcat and it will be embedded in your application and it will start your application on a particular port. By default it's 8080, but you can configure it. So it's very easy and you will see how it is. Now imagine I want to do this. I will need to probably go to Google. I will need to download Tomcat, which is another software I need to download. And then after I download it, I need to start it, and then I need to build my application and so on and blah, 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 blah. But with Spring Boot, I will just go to my application here. And you see, let me just put here, external libraries. With Spring Boot, all I need to do is I need to put the web module. How the web module is called? It's org Spring Framework Boot, Spring Boot Starter, and /web. Now, before I do this, let me just restart my application. This is our application which we have built so far. You see, it starts from here and then it finishes. It's closing because it has done all the commands which I have given. The get people method is called and it closes. But I don't want that. I want my application to be continuously available. So all I have to do is type -web and that's all. And then I will need to refresh this. And behind the scenes, if you pay close attention here, okay, in my case, it has already downloaded Tomcat, but in your case, maybe it will take some time. You will see something like embed core Tomcat. And if we go here, it has downloaded the Spring web package. Gradle has done this behind the scenes. Now, if I start this application again, you will see now that the application hasn't been closed. You see the application availability is readiness state. So this is something for Kubernetes, but ignore this. But you can see my application is not stopped. You see, it's continuously starting. And let me just type 8080 here. You will see this embedded Tomcat web server, which has been added automatically by Spring Boot, has been already initialized on port 8080. So if I go here and type 127.0.0.1.8080, this is basically my application. But because if you see here, this is something which has been logged, and this is something which my application has returned to me. Now I haven't configured anything, I haven't added anything, and that's why I have this default white label error page, which is also added by Spring Boot. Now, normally in a Java web application, you will need to also configure this. And you see here, basically what I did with this command, I said, hey, give me your local, home endpoint. So this is like the slash. So when you visit like google.com, you see this behind the scenes, as I said, google.com, it has like an IP and a port. But my particular web server doesn't have anything attached to it. And pay close attention. See here, you see get slash. Now we have briefly discussed about HTTP methods. Behind the scenes, this browser, which is the client, has told the server, which is this application, has sent a request and says, hey, give me your root endpoint. No parameters, no nothing, just give me your root endpoint. And because I didn't configure this, by default is redirecting to this get error endpoint, which Spring configures for me. So that's all to just add a Spring Web module /web. Now I will leave this here. You can also add this and refresh the Gradle and start the application to make sure it's running. And then in the next video, we will continue to code and build our RESTful APIs and build our application.